Good day everyone! Welcome back to my channel. Please click this playlist for more videos on second language acquisition. Today, let's discuss Krashen's 5 hypotheses. First hypothesis is the acquisition learning distinction. It states that adults have two distinct and independent ways of developing competence in a second language. Language acquisition is a subconscious process, the way a child learns language. In non-technical language, acquisition is picking up a language. That is something that a child or a person does not deliberately do. The result of language acquisition, which is acquired competence, is also subconscious. We are generally not consciously aware of the rules of the languages we have acquired. Instead, we have a feel for correctness. Grammatical sentences sound right or feel right, and errors feel wrong, even if we do not consciously know what rule was violated. Language learning refers to the conscious knowledge of a second language, knowing the rules, being aware of them, and being able to talk about them. In non-technical terms, learning is knowing about a language, known to most people as grammar or rules. Thus, language learning can be compared to learning about a language. The acquisition learning distinction hypothesis claims that adults do not lose the ability to acquire languages the way that children do. Just as research shows that error correction has little effect on children learning a first language, so too error correction has little effect on language acquisition. The natural order hypothesis. This states that we acquire the rules of language in a predictable order, some rules tending to come early and others late. The order does not appear to be determined solely by formal simplicity, and there is evidence that it is independent of the order in which rules are taught in language classes. The natural order hypothesis argues that the acquisition of grammatical structures occurs in a predictable sequence. The natural order hypothesis applies to both first language acquisition and second language acquisition, but although similar, the order of acquisition often differs between first and second languages. In other words, the order of acquisition of a first language is different from the order of acquisition of that same language as a second language. Regardless of native language, all language learners of any single second language appear to follow the same predictable order. For example, learners of English as a second language generally acquire the grammatical structure of yes-no questions before the grammatical structure of WH questions. Brown reported that children acquiring English as a first language tended to acquire certain grammatical morphemes or function words earlier than others. For example, the progressive marker ing, as in he is playing baseball, and the plural marker s, two dogs, were among the first morphemes acquired, while the third person singular marker s, as in he lives in New York, and the possessive s, John's hat, were typically acquired much later, coming anywhere from 6 months to 1 year later. Dulay and Burt reported that children acquiring English as a second language also show a natural order for grammatical morphemes regardless of their first language. The child's second language order of acquisition was different from the first language order, but different groups of second language acquirers showed striking similarities. The monitor hypothesis. The monitor hypothesis claims that acquisition and learning are used in very specific ways. Normally, acquisition initiates our utterances in a second language and is responsible for our fluency. Learning has only one function, and that is as a monitor or editor. Learning comes into play only to make changes in the form of our utterance after it has been produced by the acquired system. This can happen before we speak or write or after self-correction. The monitor hypothesis implies that formal rules or conscious learning play only a limited role in second language performance. The monitor hypothesis, Krashen points to the learning process as a system which monitors and analyzes our development of this second language. The monitor tends to show us our failures and errors and fix our output. Krashen also points to the fact that we only will have a good use of our output if the student has a background of the structures and rules of grammar. Also, according to Krashen, the process of developing the second language depends on the three conditions, and these are time, focus on form, and know the rule. Time. A second language performer needs to have sufficient time. For most people, the normal conversation does not allow enough time to think about the use rules. The overuse of rules in conversation can lead to trouble. For example, hesitant style of talking and inattention to what the conversational partner is saying. Focus on form. To use the monitor effectively, time is not enough. The performer must also be focused on form or thinking about correctness. That's according to Dulay and Bird in 1978. Even when we have time, we may be so involved in what we are saying that we do not attend to how we are saying it. Know the rule. Linguistics has taught us that the structure of language is extremely complex, and they claim to have described only a fragment of the best known languages. We can be sure that our students are exposed only to a small part of the total grammar of the language, and we know that even the best students do not learn every rule they are exposed to. Krashen also pointed that monitor will depend on the three conditions and from the type of the users. He had pointed three kinds of user, and they are monitor over users, monitor under users, and the optimal monitor user. Monitor over users. These are the people who attempt to monitor all the time, performers who are constantly checking out their output with their conscious knowledge of the second language. As a result, such performers may speak hesitantly, often self-correct in the middle of utterances, and are so concerned with correctness that they cannot speak with any real fluency. Monitor under users. These are performers who have not learned, or if they have learned, prefer not to use their conscious knowledge even when conditions allow it. Underusers are typically uninfluenced by error correction, can self-correct only by using a feel of correctness, or if it sounds right, and rely completely on the acquired system. The optimal user, our pedagogical goal is to produce optimal users, performers who use the monitor when it is appropriate and when it does not interfere with communication. Many optimal users will not use grammar in ordinary conversations where it might interfere. In writing and in planned speech, however, when there is time, optimal users will typically make whatever corrections they can to raise the accuracy of their output. The input hypothesis. According to this hypothesis, the results of the acquisition of a second language are related to the input that the acquirer receives or is exposed to. However, this input has to be understood, comprehensible input, and it is from this precept that Krashen established that in order for the acquirer to achieve results, the level of language he is exposed to must follow the I+1 standard, where I means acquirer's actual competence in the language, and +1 means a bit further. Based on how children acquire their first language in the caretaker speech, a simple language used with children for them to understand, Krashen proposed something similar to be worked on with adults: the teacher talk, the foreigner talk, and the interlanguage talk, also known as simple codes. The teacher talk is the classroom language that accompanies exercises, the language of explanations in the second language and in some foreign language classrooms, and the language of classroom management. Interlanguage talk is simply the speech of other second language acquirers, often that of the foreign student peer group, and foreigner talk may be of two kinds. The term has been used to describe native speakers' imitations of second language speech, or rather their acquisition of aspects of this interlanguage. The affective filter hypothesis. Affective variable may be of the three forms. We have motivation, self-confidence, and anxiety. Motivation is when performers with high motivation generally do better in second language acquisition, usually but not always integrative. Self-confidence. Performers with self-confidence and a good self-image tend to do better in second language acquisition. And anxiety. Low anxiety appears to be conducive to second language acquisition, whether measured as personal or classroom anxiety. The filter hypothesis explains why it is possible for an acquirer to obtain great deal of comprehensible input and yet stop short, and sometimes well short, of the native speaker level or fossilize. When this occurs, it is due to the affective filter. The operation of the affective filter. The affective filter, posited by Dulay and Bird, acts to prevent input from being used for language acquisition. Acquirers with optimal attitudes are hypothesized to have low affective filters. Classrooms that encourage low filters are those that promote low anxiety among students, that keep students off the defensive. This picture does not diminish in any way the importance of affective variables in pedagogy. The affective filter hypothesis implies that our pedagogical goals should not only include supplying comprehensible input but also creating a situation that encourages a low filter.